was October of 2022, and I was living alone in a small house tucked inside a quiet, family-sized neighborhood. I'd been there since 2015, long enough to watch Halloween slowly fade away. After 2020, it just stopped. No decorations, no trick-or-treaters, no music or laughter echoing down the street. The last couple of years had been completely silent on Halloween night, so I figured this year would be no different. That morning, I made some coffee and stepped out onto the porch to enjoy the fall air and the colors of the trees. But the second I opened the door, I froze. There were two figures standing in my front yard, about 30 feet away, right by the tree line. They looked like kids, at least I thought they were, but it was hard to tell. They were both tall and thin, wearing Halloween masks that hid their faces completely. The moment they saw me, they stopped dead still, then hurried off into the trees without saying a word. It looked exactly like when you catch kids doing something they shouldn't. I remember thinking it was weird seeing anyone in masks that early in the morning, but I brushed it off. Probably just high schoolers being weird. I sat down, drank my coffee, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling crawling up my back. The rest of the day went on as usual, quiet, calm, uneventful, until around 4, when I set out a small bowl of candy, just in case. Even if no one showed up, felt wrong not to. By 8, I was on the couch watching old Halloween movies, the street outside dark and lifeless. And then, out of nowhere, came a knock at the front door. Loud, slow, deliberate. I hadn't seen anyone walk up, and honestly, it was way too late for trick-or-treaters. I grabbed the bowl of candy and opened the door, trying to shake off the strange feeling I had earlier. But when I saw who it was, my stomach dropped. It was the same two kids, or at least I thought they were kids, from that morning. They were dressed in all black again, with those same blank masks hiding their faces. Up close, though, I realized they were taller than I'd thought. Definitely too tall to be trick-or-treating. And they weren't carrying bags or buckets. Nothing to hold candy. They just stood there, perfectly still, not saying a word. I forced a smile and held out the bowl, asking if they wanted some, but they didn't move, didn't speak. The silence stretched too long, so I nervously laughed and closed the door, heart pounding a little harder than I wanted to admit. I told myself it had to be some dumb Halloween prank, maybe high schoolers trying to creep out neighbors for fun. After a minute, I peeked outside again, but they were gone. Somehow that made it worse. I went back to the couch, trying to shake the unease, watching TV until well past midnight. By the time I finally got ready for bed, the house was quiet again. I started to drift off, but just as I began to fall asleep, a single heavy knock echoed through the house, snapping me wide awake. I jumped out of bed and cracked open my bedroom door, heart hammering in my chest. The knocking came again, slow and heavy, echoing through the dark, empty halls of my house. Each thud seemed to shake the air around me. I crept downstairs, every step creaking under my feet, trying to convince myself it was just another prank. But this didn't feel like a joke anymore. This was different. This was someone trying to scare me on purpose. I peeked through the small window near the door and froze. Only one of them was there now. He stood motionless, mask covering his face, knocking over and over again. But where was the other one? That thought sent chills racing up my spine. I stepped back from the door, forcing myself to think when I heard it. A faint creak behind me. I turned. At the end of the hallway, a dark shape stood still for half a second before sprinting straight toward me, something glinting in his hand. A knife. I bolted upstairs, slammed my bedroom door, locked it, and shoved everything I could find against it. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial the police. I whispered into the phone, begging them to hurry. Outside the door, I could hear their voices, low, tense, whispering back and forth like they were arguing about what to do next. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. After what felt like forever, their footsteps creaked down the stairs and faded into silence. When the cops finally arrived, they searched the whole house, but found nothing. No prints, no signs of forced entry, nothing at all. Looking back, we all agreed that the one knocking at the front door was just a setup, a distraction so the other could sneak in and attack me. What still keeps me up at night is wondering why. Why me? Everyone I've told thinks it was just some messed up teenagers, or maybe young adults trying to pull off something twisted for Halloween. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was just random. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that they picked my house on purpose, and the scariest part is knowing I'll probably never find out why. If this story gave you chills tonight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true fall horror stories. Stay safe, keep your doors locked, and trust your instincts, especially on Halloween night. There's a stretch of woods right behind my neighborhood, big enough that you could wander for hours without running into another person. I've hiked those trails for years, and honestly, I always preferred it when I was completely alone. No voices, no footsteps but my own. Just the sound of wind moving through the bare branches. This trip was late in the season, near the end of fall, when the trees were already stripped clean and the air had that sharp, cold bite that warns winter isn't far. I figured I could squeeze in one last solo camp before the snow hit. The trail was completely deserted, no cars at the trailhead, no other hikers along the way, just that deep, quiet calm that always comes before night. I found a small clearing just off the main path, one I'd camped at before, and it felt familiar, safe even. I pitched my tent, built a small fire, and made some decaf to warm up while watching the sun sink behind the trees. But as the temperature dropped and the wind picked up, I noticed something out there. Something moving between the trees. Too far to make out, but close enough to know it was watching me. At first I told myself it was just an animal, maybe a deer. But the longer I sat there, the harder it got to believe that. I figured getting warm might help me shake off the nerves, so I climbed into my sleeping bag inside the tent, leaving the flap open just enough to see the campfire glow. The heat from the flames helped a little, but the darkness beyond that small circle of light felt endless. I've camped alone plenty of times before, but that night something felt different. The air felt heavy, almost like the woods were holding their breath. People always say if you ever get that gut feeling that something's wrong, you should trust it and leave. I used to think that was just paranoia. Turns out it's not. I stayed, watching the fire dance and crackle for hours, trying to convince myself everything was fine. But then, just as the flames began to die down, I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the leaves. Not an animal. Too heavy, too controlled. Someone, or something, was walking just beyond the firelight, circling the campsite. The sound was coming from right behind my tent, the one spot I couldn't see no matter how I turned. My whole body tensed up, frozen, as the footsteps got closer, slow and deliberate, crunching through the leaves until they were no more than a few feet away. Then, silence. The kind that feels thick, heavy, and wrong. I could hear every beat of my heart, every gust of wind slipping through the trees. I wanted to believe it was nothing, maybe a branch falling or an animal passing by, but deep down I knew better. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I unzipped my sleeping bag, grabbed my flashlight, and burst out of the tent, spinning around and pointing the beam straight into the dark. Nothing. The woods were still. Too still. No footsteps, no rustling, no sign of anyone or anything leaving. That silence felt worse than hearing the steps. I stood there, shaking, light trembling in my hands, scanning every shadow for 15 straight minutes, trying to convince myself I hadn't just imagined it. But every instinct in me said I wasn't alone. My mind was racing, torn between packing up and running through the woods in total darkness or staying put and keeping watch until morning. The fire was dying fast, and the cold bit through my jacket, making the decision for me. I started taking down my tent, my hands shaking, when I suddenly heard a rush of footsteps right behind it. Quick, light, then gone. I froze, my flashlight scanning the trees, but all I saw were shadows dancing from the flickering fire. My chest tightened as I shoved everything into my backpack as fast as I could, stopping every few seconds to check my surroundings. That's when he appeared. A man stepping out of the dark into the edge of the firelight. Tall, broad, dressed in torn jeans and a filthy jacket, eyes hollow like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't look lost, he looked like he was waiting. My instincts screamed to run. He started walking toward me, his voice low and rough, asking something I couldn't even process. I backed away, and his expression changed. He knew I was about to bolt. The second his hand twitched, I turned and sprinted into the woods, branches clawing at my arms. His footsteps pounded behind me for half a minute before fading, but I didn't stop running. Not until my lungs burned, my legs went numb, and I realized I had no idea where I was. I sat there in complete darkness, too scared to move, too lost to know which direction to even try. The woods were dead silent, every sound swallowed by the cold October air. I pressed my back against a tree, clutching my flashlight like it was a weapon, even though the batteries had long since died. A few times, I thought I heard faint movement out there. Branches snapping, footsteps dragging slowly through the leaves. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Whoever that man was, I think he was still out there looking for me. I didn't sleep, not for a second. I just waited, counting every minute until the first hint of daylight. When the sun finally came up, I somehow found my way back to the trail and made it out alive. To this day, I have no idea what that man wanted or how long he'd been watching me. But I know one thing: if your gut ever tells you to leave, listen to it. You might not get a second chance. And if this story gave you chills, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true fall horror stories that'll keep you awake tonight. Last fall, my sister had a Halloween weekend trip planned, a quick getaway for some kind of party. Since she was flying, bringing her dog Milo wasn't really an option. She asked if I could watch him for a couple of days, and of course I said yes. The only issue was my apartment didn't allow pets, so I decided to stay at her house instead. I packed up my laptop, a few essentials, and drove the half hour to her place early that morning. Not long after I got there, she left for the airport and it was just me and Milo. He was a good dog. Sweet, quiet, and calm for a German Shepherd. I'd watched him plenty of times before and he'd mostly just nap near me while I worked, but that day felt different. Every so often, Milo's head would perk up, his ears locked forward as he stared toward the hallway, completely still. At first, I brushed it off. Dogs hear everything, but it kept happening. He'd sit up, alert, watching the doorway like he was waiting for something. After the third time I got up to check the house, Milo close at my side the whole way. Nothing. No sound, no movement. Still, that uneasy feeling lingered. By the time I wrapped up work and took him for an evening walk, the woods behind my sister's place felt especially quiet, too quiet. And when Milo suddenly froze on the trail, refusing to move, staring into the empty distance, that's when I started to feel like something out there was watching us too. Milo's behavior on the way back had me on edge. He kept glancing over his shoulder every few steps, his tail tucked low, and he stayed pressed close to my leg the whole time. Seeing him so tense made me feel worse, because dogs don't fake fear, they sense things we can't. Once inside, I called my sister to ask if Milo had been acting strange lately. She said no, sounding confused, and told me not to worry. But even while I was talking to her, Milo wouldn't leave my side. It was like he was guarding me from something I couldn't see. That thought alone made me uneasy. After hanging up, I walked through the house again, checking the doors and windows. Everything looked fine, but when I went upstairs and glanced out the spare bedroom window, I saw it. Someone walking near the edge of the property, just barely visible before disappearing behind the trees. It happened so fast I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Still, that chill in my chest didn't go away. I sat at the desk for the rest of the night, pretending to watch videos while Milo laid quietly beside me, both of us waiting for something that, thankfully, never came. For the next couple of hours, everything seemed normal again. Milo was sound asleep, and I tried to unwind by watching YouTube, pretending the weirdness from earlier never happened. Maybe it was nothing, I told myself, just my imagination running wild. When it got late, I decided to head to bed, but took Milo out one last time. I opened the back door, flipped on the porch light, and the cold air hit me immediately. Milo hesitated, ears perked, before slowly stepping outside. He walked toward the edge of the yard, then suddenly froze, staring toward the side of the house. His whole body stiffened. I followed his gaze and leaned a bit out the door, and that's when I saw him. A man came charging straight at me from the darkness. My heart stopped. I stumbled back just as Milo bolted forward, barking like I'd never heard before. The guy froze mid-run, panic flashing across his face before he spun and disappeared into the woods. I slammed the door and locked it, shaking so hard I could barely dial 911. The police arrived, but it didn't help much. They found nothing. Just empty woods and footprints that led nowhere. But when I checked the door again later, I realized the lock didn't even work. He could have come in any time. The lock still made that little click when you turned it, but the door would swing open anyway. My sister swore it had never been like that before. That night, I didn't take any chances. I packed a bag, grabbed Milo, and checked into a hotel. Lying awake in that quiet room, I couldn't shake the thought that whoever that man was, he'd been watching us long before we ever noticed him. Maybe he was in the woods when we walked, maybe he was even inside the house while I was working. Thinking back to how Milo kept staring at the doorway still gives me chills. It's scary to realize how close you might have been to real danger without even knowing it. Honestly, I owe that dog everything. He saved me that night. My sister never had another issue after that, which makes me believe the guy wasn't after her at all. Maybe he was after me. Maybe he knew I'd be there alone. I still get uneasy when I think about it. What do you think? Was it just a coincidence or something darker? If this story gave you chills, make sure to hit like, share your thoughts below, and check out my other videos for more true fall horror stories that'll keep you awake tonight.